And at this time, I would like to introduce our first speaker today, who is me. And I will get my presentation shared for you all. Today, I'm going to be talking about overwintering pests um, and keeping pests out of your home this fall. So just ask Jody to confirm that you can see this correctly.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, great. So keeping pests out of your home this fall, from stink bugs to mice. Let's just get right into it. These are the critters that you may be familiar with, or you may expect to see this time of year. The biggest, of course, and the one that causes most people concern is going to be our Peromyscus mice. This is a mouse that spends most of its life outdoors, foraging on natural food sources, but then in the fall, it will enter buildings to find a suitable place to nest and protect itself against cold temperatures. Similarly, for the insect pests that we see, they're doing a very similar thing. They're coming indoors strictly for the purpose of finding protection against cold temperatures, against predation, and maybe against desiccating or drying winds in the wintertime. And we have a variety of insects that do that in the Northeast. This includes the brown marmorated stink bug, which you're probably familiar with as an invasive pest, the western conifer seed bug, the box elder bug, clusterfly, ladybird beetles, and elm leaf beetle. And I'm not going to go into specific details about each of these insects, but there are some differences in why they're around our homes and why they're coming into our homes. So for more information on that, I would recommend that you look at our What's Bugging You Fall Invaders page. And I will post the link to that in the chat as we move forward. So why do they enter? We've talked a little bit about this. Really, it's for protection against the cold. These particular pests don't want to be out in the cold, just like we don't want to be in the cold during the wintertime. And their behavioral response to that is to enter structures or something that approximates a structure. So in nature, the brown marmorated stink bug, for example, will hide under loose bark of a tree. But now that there's structures nearby to where they're performing their summertime functions, they enter those structures in the fall. So here we have some brown marmorated stink bugs on the left that are aggregating. They would be between pieces of wood in a garage, for example, which is where I found these guys. And also rodents are doing a very similar thing where they are looking for protection and enter our homes in the fall. So protection from the elements. Now, rodents are doing something that's a little bit different than the insects, is that in addition to entering just for protection, they are also looking for places that are providing warm air currents. So if you have a door that doesn't close completely and warm air is emitting from that, that's really attractive to a mouse that's walking along the perimeter of your home and may signal to them that this is a great place for them to spend their winter. Also, if there's food odors emanating from that source, would be highly attractive to rodents. So these are two things that we're going to look at in terms of how we can prevent these pests from coming indoors. The first step that we're going to recommend is a detail-oriented inspection to identify entry points and attractive conditions around your home. And the reason that we're hosting this presentation now in early September is that this is the perfect time to start your inspection. In fact, it may actually be a little bit late for some of these pests. Just yesterday, we had our first Western conifer seed bug landing on the house trying to get inside. So it's the turn of the seasons and these critters are trying to get indoors. When you're outside, you want to do a detailed walk around your home and look for openings around things like pipes. So we see here around this oil tank inflow and the exhaust vent. There could be openings, but also there could be openings at the sill plate where the below ground parts of your home meet the above ground parts. In other words, where the concrete or cinder block interact with the wood portions of a building. So we want to look here and inspect closely. It would require us to get kind of down low or use our hands to inspect this, being very careful, of course, of things like spiders and other biting insects that could be under that sill plate. So you might want to wear gloves or use some kind of tool to probe that area. But these are two very common entry points for pests into the home. We want to think about the size that would allow these pests to enter the home as well. So for mice, it's based entirely on the size of their skull. Um, there's a lot of misconceptions out there about how rodents get into small openings, and people think that they're able to collapse their skeleton or do some crazy things. They are mammals, they have bones just like us, so they cannot do anything to their structure of their body, but they are extremely flexible. And we have a great video on our YouTube channel. I'll post that link in the chat as well to show how they can get themselves into these very small openings. The opening sizes that you want to keep in mind are this pencil and dime. So for a rodent, the height of its skull is about the size of a pencil. So if you can fit a pencil underneath a doorway, for example, a mouse can fit its way underneath there. If it's a round opening that the rodent is going through, the width is a little bit larger than the height. So it needs to be larger, up to about the size of a dime, for that mouse to squeeze through. For insects, it can be a much smaller opening. We often give the analogy of the thickness of a credit card. So just a couple millimeters to allow some of these insects to squeeze in. So one of the things that you can use as you're doing an inspection is this exterior inspection form. And again, I'll post the link to this in the chat. This is going to help you figure out the areas that are conducive to pest entry. And you see here this image on the right. We've just drawn a real easy outline of what the home looks like, and we've circled areas that are potentially problematic. We can go back and seal those entry points. So let's walk you through what an exterior inspection would look like. This looks like it's in the wintertime, but this time of year, this is what we would do. So we want to keep in mind that we'll start and end at the same place during our inspection. This will ensure that we see the entire perimeter of the facility of your home, and we don't miss any points of entry. So we walk slowly, we look up, down, we get down on our hands and knees to look up under at that sill plate, and then we return back to our starting point. As we do this, we're identifying areas that have an entry point that would allow pests to enter. So you see I've indicated them here with numbers, and we also may want to indicate any conducive conditions. So if you look closely here, you could see that there's a dog bowl with food. We see that there's firewood stacked immediately adjacent to the home, and potentially in the yard, since there's dog food and dog chain, there could be dog poop that would be attractive to things like mice. So we've noted all of that on our inspection. So this is what we're looking for, right? We're looking for those entry points. We're looking for evidence of a pest coming in. And this case, this would be mice that have entered the home. They've chewed through this weak window screening to gain access into this vent. So the next step then would obviously be to seal any entry points that would allow these pests to come in. Here we have installed some 1/4-inch hardware cloth on that vent. This allows for airflow to continue to occur. We don't want to seal this space and prevent that breathing that's required of this. But keep in mind that if the pests that you're dealing with are something like a rat that's stronger and able to get through sturdier materials, we'll have to focus on different products for that type of exclusion. Now, I see Jody is posting some of the links to the chat. I appreciate that. I will also post a link to our scope page in general. This has everything that you need to know, especially about rodent exclusion. The section that I want to focus on for you right now is that material selection section. And that will provide some information about what materials you can use to effectively exclude mice from a facility. It will also talk about the types of sealants that can be used on small openings to exclude insects. So this is your go-to for that information. If we select the wrong products, we could just be leaving that opening vulnerable to future entry points. Okay. So one of the products that we could use are these stainless steel metal mesh fibers. These are abrasive to chewing rodents. As they try and pull on this, it irritates their gums. They don't want to continue to chew on this. So this is one technique that can be used for small openings. I will note here that this is not steel wool. Steel wool over time will rust, become brittle, and can be easily removed by rodents. This is a specific product that you can find in that material selection resources that is irritating to rodents. Another thing to consider is that when we're sealing openings around doors and windows, we want to use sealants and not caulks. Caulks, as they dry, they can pull away from the surfaces where we've applied them. And this leaves subsequent entry points for pests, especially insects, to enter. So we want to look for elastomeric sealants that remain flexible, keeping contact with multiple surfaces and not pulling away. Again, there's recommendations for the types of products to select for this on our scope website. And again, the emphasis here is selecting the right tool for the job. So there's a number of door sweeps that can be purchased and installed from big box stores or specialty companies. It's important to consider if the pest that we have is able to overcome that. So you're seeing a close-up here of a door with a rubber gasket door sweep, and mice have chewed an opening to allow themselves to enter right through this. This can be done in a single night. One mouse can chew its way through some of these rubber gasket door sweeps. So if we know that we're dealing with a particular pest and there's a high pressure on the outside of our home, we may want to go for a more expensive product that's able to prevent them from entering rather than the standard or generic type of door sweeps that are really designed for maintaining indoor temperatures, not for keeping pests out. So real quickly here, in the next couple minutes, I do want to highlight one common entry point for these overwintering pests that many people overlook. This is the brown marmorated stink bug. Very soon, we're going to start to see these guys landing on the outside of our homes and trying to get indoors. And one of the common ways that they get inside are these weep holes that are designed to allow water to be eliminated from a window casing. But when they're installed, they have a cover on them that allows water to come out, but prevents insects from going in. And over time, they may fall out, they may be damaged or broken. So you see here that this would provide access for an insect to enter the window frame. And then if you open the window at all, they can get indoors. Another one that we see in this picture is a torn window screen. So we want to repair any tears that occur in the window screen that would permit an insect large enough as a brown marmorated stink bug to enter. An important consideration for this weep hole is that the products that we use must not impede the function of the weep hole. You don't want to use something like a sealant to fill that weep hole because now you're going to accumulate water on the inside. And this is one of the considerations that we have for exclusion in general, is that people feel like they want to make a very tight structure and prevent anything from getting in, but then we may create new issues of moisture problems. So we see here on the right some different solutions. We have those standard covers that would allow water to come out, but no insects to go in. And also those stainless steel metal mesh fibers have been shown to allow water to come out, but prevent pests from entering. So just two solutions there. And another important one to consider this time of year is to remove those window air conditioning units before the major invasion of stink bugs occurs. These insects can fit through very tiny openings. They can get underneath the window that's holding it in place and come between the window and the air conditioning unit. So we want to make sure that those are removed and the windows are sealed tightly before that invasion event occurs. So I'll wrap up with this idea, is that we want to consider being proactive rather than reactive. This image was taken in a commercial building, and it shows the general approach that people take to pest management. Instead of sealing that little hole underneath the door that's allowing mice to come in, most people resort to just putting down a pesticide product and hoping that will solve their problem. But in this instance, we're allowing the pest to come in and then hoping it feeds on a bait rather than preventing it from coming in to begin with. So just something to think about as you're approaching this fall is to do that inspection, to find those entry points and seal them and prevent the pest problems rather than having to manage those mice and insects in your home later into the fall. So with that, I will stop sharing. I'll allow Jody to start sharing her screen. And if we have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Our next speaker is Dr. Jody Gangloff-Kaufman, and Jody is the coordinator of the Community IPM program at the New York State IPM program. And today, Jody has the distinct pleasure of talking about a pest that people love to hate, which is the fruit fly. So I will let Jody take it away.
Okay, can you see my slides correctly?
Yes, looks great.
So I get to talk to you about fruit flies. Thanks for being here, everybody, today. You know, there are many kinds of household flies that we commonly deal with at all times of the year. And by household flies, I mean ones that can breed indoors. Most flies do not breed indoors, but the ones that do include, you know, our common fruit fly, vinegar fly, its cousin, the dark-eyed fruit fly, a moth or a drain fly, which is that heart-shaped little guy in the blue frame, phorid fly, which is below that. You see these pupae all over a dirty garbage can, all from our Flickr account. And you see the fungus gnat in yellow. So these are all things that get confused. They may be unnoticeable until there are a lot of them, but what do they all have in common? What's the commonality here? Really, it's breeding sites. So this breeding site is pretty disgusting. I hope no one's house has this kind of scenario, but this is common in restaurants. It's just a good example of something that could breed probably all of those pests. Now, is this a failure of people to clean their house? You know, sometimes it is, but occasionally it's not. Sometimes these are hidden or unintentional problems of a spill, something that gets behind a counter or, you know, under the stove. But in the case of moth flies, they tend to come from the sewer system. And you sometimes see them indoors in the summertime when the larvae can creep through the sewer system and come right up the drain. With phorid flies, we often see these in houses when there's a cracked sewer line. If you see phorid flies in the house, that is the first thought you think of. And it often happens, unfortunately, under slab construction, under houses that are on slabs, which means a big construction project to fix it. And then fungus gnats come generally from overwatered plants. It could be indoors or outdoors, but you get fungus gnats indoors from overwatering your plants. However, fruit flies come from the great outdoors. They live out there in the summer, and then they also come from the supermarket. So produce can often have, you know, the eggs of fruit flies. This is why you can get fruit flies in your house in January, because the produce you have, you've bought is, it has perhaps the eggs or even maybe larvae, unfortunately. So just a little bit about the dark-eyed fruit fly. Here is the common fruit fly that might be in your kitchen, and the dark-eyed fruit fly, which tends to be in more filthy conditions, like a commercial kitchen or bar that isn't well cleaned. They're bigger and heavier bodied, and they have this sort of, you know, behavior where they sit on the wall quietly, sometimes in great numbers. Whereas fruit flies tend to fly around. They'll lay on the wall too, but fruit flies like fresher, just starting to ferment foods, and dark-eyed fruit flies really prefer something that's broken down quite a bit. Now, step one in IPM here is find the source. Sanitation is an essential part of IPM. The IPM tenet here is remove food, remove water, remove shelter. And fermenting foods are all three for fruit flies. So of course, ripe and rotting fruits and vegetables, especially field ripened. I say that because right now we're, you know, harvesting tomatoes out of the garden, and any tomato that has a little bruise or, you know, is really, really ripe could bring fruit flies into your house because they exist outside. You might have spilled juice, beer, or wine, those kind of drinks that will ferment, but also containers that you're recycling, if they're not properly rinsed out, could have residue that breeds fruit flies. Your trash can have the residue of, you know, the day's garbage. Your compost pile, if you have a compost pile or a bucket or something, keep that away from the house. Establish your compost pile far away from the house, and you'll have fewer fruit flies getting in. And of course, they can breed in sponges and mops that are not properly cleaned after being used. Now, step two in IPM for fruit flies is to buy or create a trap. This is one of the traps, seem to be very popular, just a funnel of paper over a container of liquid that is fermenting. Homemade traps are effective, commercial traps are effective, but the important features here are that you have an attractive bait with the smell of fermentation. And you know, it could simply be a fresh glass of wine, because wine starts to go bad or have these volatiles that attract, you know, fruit flies right away. You need a container with either liquid to catch flies or a container that doesn't let flies escape. That's an important part. And then these need to be inexpensive and easily made or easily cleaned, right? And step two is to buy or create well, I just said that. This is another type of trap that can be created. Poking small holes in cling wrap over a mason jar or a cup that contains bait. And you can bait the trap with, you know, wine, beer, juice, cider vinegar is a good one, sugar, yeast, water. That's, you know, really what you have, or ripe fruit, just straight up ripe fruit, which will decay over time. So the bottom line is, well, the bottom line will come next. This is an important warning. Do not use Nuvan strips or hot shots in areas with people, pets, or food. These are meant for industrial spaces, not even commercial kitchens, nowhere near people, pets, or food. It's an illegal practice and it's dangerous, and we commonly see it in restaurants, but you might be tempted to do this at home. These hotshot strips are still on the market, but they're really meant for garages and attics, not for places around people. Yeah. So the take-home message here is sanitation is IPM, and flies that breed in households are breeding in something. They're breeding in something that needs to be cleaned up or moved or discarded. And here's a fun fact: as one who deals with fruit flies often, it is much easier to catch fruit flies with your bare hands out of the air if your hands are wet. I don't know why, maybe they stick to your hand or something, but we do this often. We play games here. So that's your IPM minute on fruit flies, and please come visit us. Our Flickr account, which I like to mention, has almost 5,000 wonderful pictures on it. For anyone who's out there who might need pictures or want to look at IPM pictures. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jody. So the time is 12:28. So if anybody has a question for Jody, we could potentially answer that live. Otherwise, we could put them in the chat. I'm not seeing anything. You know, somebody suggested that their peaches were a source of fruit flies this time of year. I know our tomatoes have been a source of fruit flies coming in the house as well. Any other questions?
Oh, so the frame was cut off. Damn, sorry. Okay, so any suggestions for keeping insects from creeping in via board and batten siding?
I did respond to that
Okay.
a little bit further down. We did have a question. So the traps work great. Any suggestions for houseflies in homes?
Well, houseflies either come from outside, wherever they're breeding, or they're breeding indoors. And I think it's more likely they're coming in from the outdoors. And so you have to wonder, how are they getting inside? Is there a ripped screen? Is there a door that's constantly open? And make sure that that's not the case. You know, make sure that screens are good and the door is closed. And I know that in places where there are farms, there tend to be a lot of houseflies. So, you know, the old fashioned flypaper. I hate to suggest it, it's something from my grandma's era, but it does capture them. One thing about flypaper that makes it more effective is that it has little icons of or pictures of flies on it, which tell flies that that's a good place to rest. So other flies will come to it. So it's a little visual trick to get flies to land on it.
Great. Well, thank you, Jody. It is 12:30, excuse me. So in the essence of time, we will end our segment today at that. We do thank you for your participation. Keep in mind that a recording of this video will be posted to our YouTube channel. So we hope everyone has a wonderful Labor Day weekend, and we hope to see you at a future event. Thank you.